How are we doing today? Amazing, right?
Well, can't fault that.
3 days of fantastic information. This is really the cutting edge, and I think comes down to this panel in a sense because it's the contact experience that is going to change the nature of reality. Actually, my name's Alan Steinfeld. I do a show called New Realities, which is about how this fabric of change within the consciousness of people are going to be affected worldwide. And I'll just tell you one little joke to start because it's always nice to start with a joke. This is from New Yorker magazine. I saw a little cartoon. There's this typical American guy in a spacecraft, baseball cap, beard belly, and he's looking around, and there's two aliens next to him, and one alien says to the other, "You abducted him, you feed him." So, just wanted to get that out of the way because it's not my, but we have to bring a little humor to this subject because it's kind of a serious, I mean, it's about transformation. In a way, humankind has always resisted that. So let me introduce today's panelists, or contestants, if you want to call them that. Panelists. Whitley Strieber. I think Whitley is one of the most instrumental people in this movement. His picture on the front of Communion became iconic for what aliens look like. I mean, is that true, Whitley? Did you create that icon of the... I mean, it's your invention.
Yeah, it is a picture of what I saw on the night I had a close encounter in 1985, drawn by an artist who had done police portraits, and among other things. He was a wonderful artist. And it's pretty exact portrait. And the reason it had such an impact is that so very many people took a look at it and thought, oh my God, that wasn't a dream.
Right. So
and no, it was not.
So that's become the icon of what E.T., little grays are, from that picture on Communion in, I think, 1985 or something. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Next,
Communion was in 87. It came out in 87.
Break. And next to Whitley is Yvonne Smith, who's been regressing people back to their abduction experience. I think that's really key for people, because it's so traumatic. I mean, for many people, for me, I know it was really things I have yet to integrate. And so through hypnosis and through what she studied with Bud Hopkins, people are able to get in touch with those experiences that are awakening us to these new realities. And we have Travis Walton, Travis is one of the heroes here. I mean, what he's been through. I mean, since 1975, the ridicule, the attacks, and he stood by his truth that this happened to him. He was knocked down by everyone knows Travis Walton, was on a ship for 5 days. That is probably the best documented case of a contactee that we have on record. And it's really important that he's here. Thank you, Travis, for being here. Yes.
Thank you.
Jason Quitt, he's like the Rookie of the Year here. He's come up through the ranks. He's really doing a phenomenal job talking about the levels of reality he experienced as a contactee, and someone who's creating a bridge to the metaphysical truths of what it means to be human, what it means to be incarnate, how to travel out of the body, how to explore really the unknown, and integrating it with what we're all interested in here, the contact experience. Thanks you, Jason.
Thank you.
Yes. And we have our very own Robert Perela, my co-host in crime. And if you haven't heard Robert's story about his initial experience, it's probably one of the most dramatic I've heard. And of course, it changed his life. And you see on the front of the stage is a sort of description he'll talk about in relationship to that experience that he had that really awoke you up, didn't it, Robert?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, sure.
Right. And James GIlliland, who's yes, yeah. If you've never been to the East Eddy Ranch in southern Washington, that is a trip for all contactees. That is a pilgrimage. I was just there last summer, and you really do see things coming out of the mountain there. You see these lights emerging. If you want to have a UFO experience, or you want to tell your family because, you know, they don't believe you anyway, there's always one in every family. And actually, I had friends in my family, people in my family said, after the New York Times article came out, they said, "You were right." I said, "Yeah, I didn't want to say I told you so, but I told you so." But James GIlliland's place in Trout Lake, Washington is really something we all have to go to just to know that it's not just an imagination. It's not just people talk about. You have the experience there. People have seen Bigfoot there. He'll talk about that. Thanks, James.
All right, thanks.
Yes. Janet Lessin, one of the all-stars here, has had some amazing experiences too. They have a beautiful home in Hawaii that I had to stop by one day, and she has some phenomenal stories as a contactee. So thanks, Janet, for being here too. And Sasha, you're like, do you mind telling people how old you are?
I'm 77. I'll be 78 next month.
Right. So that's one of the benefits of being around this energy. It brings youth to your whole body. And so Sasha's a therapist. He takes people back to their times of contact and gets to the deeper truth because of his skill as a therapist. So thank you, Sasha. So let's start off at that end. And something Whitley said yesterday on the disclosure panel was that what's happening here with all of us, I think, in the audience is that, and everyone out there who's had some kind of experience, even seeing a UFO will change your life in some fundamental way. But I think you said this, Whitley, that what's happening is a fundamental shift in how we see reality. I mean, this is what the contact experience is about, and that's what this whole new culture that we're creating is about, changing the nature of reality as human beings and expanding it to something else. So do you care to comment on that?
Well, this has certainly been my experience. I've been in contact sporadically throughout my life. As a child, quite a bit, and then a long period of quiescence that exploded back into my life in my 40s when I had the close encounter in 1985. Then a long struggle to make it work. And in other words, what happened in December of '85 was I woke up in a room full of what seemed to me to be giant insects, and after about 6 weeks of struggle to try to prove to myself that this had not happened in any real way, I was forced to conclude that it did. And then I decided, well, it was terrifying and it was bizarre, but it was there, and I want to learn more. And my wife, God love her, suggested, well, why don't you go back out there at night to the same place where it happened and see if they come back. And I thought to myself, that's about the scariest thing I've ever heard. And she said, well, you're not going to find them sitting here in the living room. So out I went, night after night, and that was the beginning of building a relationship, was to serve notice that I wished to defy my own fear. I was going to defy my fear. I was not going to let this fear freeze me, or the rough treatment I got anger me and make me turn away from it. I was going to try to make it work. Now, all these years later, I am in pretty much constant contact with the visitors. I have an implant in my ear that I have, to a degree, learned to use. I have I'm no longer afraid of them in a visceral way. When they show up in my life physically, which happens sometimes, I'm still functional, and there's never a long period. It's only a few seconds usually when it develops into a physical contact, but it's bearable. And it happened recently at a dormitory at the Esalen Institute in Northern California. And the man in the room with me was really shocked because it's devastating to your ego. But I've learned a lot about what we really are. And the body is only part of the human being. The ego is only part of the human being. There's more here. This whole experience is about connecting with the more in a new way and coming into relationship with something that is already at that level. It's not necessarily all good. We're not looking at angels. We're looking at something real. And it is not necessarily all bad. And I say every time when I talk about these contacts, as I will in my workshop this evening, that something that Phil Corso said that was central to understanding this. What is on offer is a new world if we can take it.
Thank you. Thank you. Whitley. Wow. Yeah. Yvonne, do you want to pick up on that and talk about how the people you work with, reality is shifted? And what is this new world that you think Whitley and Corso referred to?
Oh my gosh, yes. Reality definitely shifts when you have this experience. You can't help but change. I'm not the same person I was 26 years ago when I started my work. And working with people on a very personal level has absolutely changed my perception of what life really is. I feel like this is reality. Mm-hmm. Out there is fake news, as we hear about that all the time. Not too long ago, maybe just been a year or two, I myself came out of the darkness.
Out of the closet about it being your abductee?
Yes, I just didn't want to use that term.
Oh,
I didn't want to
okay.
be disrespectful. We have to come up with another term. So out of the darkness,
okay.
into the
Thank
light, or however we want to
Right.
use it. However, years ago, Bud Hopkins, he was my mentor, and he cautioned me about talking about my own experiences because I'm a therapist, and he said you may lose credibility and objectivity. Mm-hmm. But over the years, I found that because I've experienced this, I am a better and stronger therapist because I know when someone tells me I couldn't tell whether it was a male or female, but it was a feeling, mm-hmm. because that was exactly what happened to me when I had a flashback. I don't remember anything in childhood, but I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, right before I started studying hypnotherapy, I began having flashbacks. And may I share one really quick?
Sure.
I don't want to take too much time, but I was, and believe me, you will have flashbacks. And I always tell my clients, don't be surprised if you're doing something really mundane. I was upstairs mopping the bathroom floor on my hands and knees, literally mopping the floor. And all of a sudden I looked up, and right before me was a huge, round, white room with, it must have been 100 tables in there, with beings working around each table. And I felt a presence behind me. She was very tall, wearing a white long gown, and she went like this. And what I felt from her was that she was telling me, you are going to be helping all these people. Wow. Then it ended. And it was so profound for me that I had a a better understanding of what people go through when I put them through the hypnotic regression. It's very tedious, it's very emotional, and I feel privileged in working with all of the experiencers. And I'm going to continue doing this as long as I can continue doing this as I'm getting older. But thank you. I want to thank you, those who are in the audience who have worked with me personally. I want to thank you for your trust and faith in my work.
Thank you, Yvonne. Well, I'm just wondering how many people have had contact or abduction or something like in this room? Well, almost half this room, so thanks for showing up and then also bringing this out to the world, to your friends and family, because this is how it's going to change, really. We are the disclosure, really. It's not government. When we come out with our truth, that's what it takes. So, and
this belongs to us.
yes.
And I just want to interject briefly this beautiful thing that Yvonne just shared. She was working on her hands and knees on the floor when this happened. And that part of the message is, this is going to take work.
Right. Right.
And it
It's
has.
going to take the work. Yes. One more thing that another person who worked with Bud, John Max, said. He says UFOs are like an outreach program to us for the consciously impaired. That's us. You know. So, Travis said something really interesting in your workshop yesterday, where we have to say, this is the reality. It's not a fantasy. It's something that we have to deal with as truth and not make it, in a way, extraordinary. I think that's what you said. Do you want to go over that comment, Travis?
Yeah, that's accurate. Objective reality is just what it always was. The only thing that's changing is our ability to perceive it accurately.
Right. And then to make it the reality that's been your experience, how would you suggest people do that instead of making it something separate from our lives?
Well, it's only natural when confronted with experiences that are completely outside the bounds of previous experience, to do a little internal reality testing. So, you see it time and time again. People will be in the midst of this kind of experience, and it's kind of a pinch yourself kind of a thing where is this real? Am I? They're wondering if am I dreaming? It's only natural, but whether it's my own experience or someone else's, it comes down to something. I distill it down to, how do you know this? When somebody relates to me something that they believe occurred, how do you know this? So they might assert the truth of something that's kind of debatable. So how do you know this? What source, what facts can you point me to, where when I get them from this source, a reliable source, you would hope, that I'll be as certain of it as you are, and. That doesn't mean that just because someone can't provide that sort of documentation that what they're saying isn't real, but there's kind of an error in our thinking that, and this is kind of the propaganda technique that the naysayers use, is to make failure to prove to be the absolute equivalent of disproof, and it's not that at all. In a court of law, so when they fail to convict the person, that doesn't prove they were innocent. That's a separate issue.
So you said yesterday it's about logic. It's about logical thing and putting it into a perspective that's practical. I think that's what you were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, and that's just my approach to it, and everybody's got their own technique, and that's what works for me.
Well, it sort of had to work for you. I mean, in order to integrate such a drastic experience, you're a logger one day, and suddenly, boom, your life changes. You have to create a way to make it work.
Yeah, you have to. The way you put it. You know, it's sort of survival. You know, this is in your lap, and you got to deal with it one way or the other.
Well, and thank you for doing that. That's why, you know, you're here talking to groups because you've been able to make that integration where somebody else might not have been able to. So thank you. Or, thanks. Jason, in my interview I did with Jason for my New Realities radio, you talked about the levels of reality that you exist on as a multidimensional being, and actually in making contact, it's not on this, it didn't seem like it's on this level of interchange, this beta level. So where do you go to, and what happens to your awareness in those contact experiences?
Sure, and I just have to say that I don't believe that I've been abducted in the sense, in a physical way, like Travis or Whitley. My experience has been solely out of body. So my body is sleeping in bed and my consciousness or astral body is taken into another awareness or another dimension of the earth. And I believe we all have access to this, and it's almost in the state between waking and dreaming. It's in between. And when we start to go into a sleep cycle, we start to enter into this altered state of awareness. And if we can keep our consciousness aware, we can actually drop. It feels like you drop inside of your body, and your body becomes almost like your sarcophagus. It's almost like it becomes frozen, and you have an other body within your body, and you can actually move around inside. And you can actually take this body and with your will and consciousness push it out. And it's almost the same description as a near-death experience where you come outside of your body and you can see your body laying there. And once I enter this state of awareness or outside of the body, that is when I start to see these type of beings that people are describing in contact scenarios are standing right there. So for me, it was never a physical experience. For me, it was a supernatural phenomenon that these beings, for me, exist in these altered states of awareness of outer body consciousness or other dimensions of the earth plane, like what we call the astral or the etheric planes. And I know that these beings can manifest themselves here physically, but I also know that they can pop back into these dimensional states. And I believe we all have that ability. We can all transition into these other states of awareness, and that's just who we are. It's just we've forgotten about it, or from years of trauma being very taboo that we're not supposed to play with this stuff, that we've kind of blocked it out of our collective memories. But I think right now, it is a time of awakening where many people are starting to experience these altered states of awareness or these other dimensional things, and they know it's not a dream, it's something else. And I also have to say that if you haven't been playing in this arena for very long, when you go to those places, when you go to those other dimensions or realities, it's almost exactly like the movie The Matrix. You cannot tell that it's not physical. It took me a long time to figure out that my body was still sleeping in bed, and my consciousness and awareness and a different type of body was navigating these other worlds.
So do you think they themselves, whoever they are, the ETs, exist in those other realms, and they kind of just come back in here for like a moment to kind of make contact, and then they go back into that realm?
From what I've experienced, yes, but I also believe that maybe, and this is just starting to percolate in my belief system, is that maybe some of these beings are from a very, very ancient previous civilization here on Earth, and that they actually shifted into another awareness or dimension, but they're so highly advanced that they can pop in and out of those realities and even be present here on Earth for long periods of time, but are able to shift back into those realities.
Right. And it seems like the dimensions they're in is a lot more complex in a way. It's so simple here, this 3D world, but, you know, where they're coming from seems there's a lot more impact.